right here on Blue Island Avenue and on With the Mic. We're here at Mole's Village Mexican Restaurant, where it's a unique location for an interview, but the perfect spot to interview our first guest. Now let's get inside and meet the candidate. Welcome in. I have the pleasure to introduce you to the inside of Mole's and my guest for the show, Alderman of the 25th Ward and the congressional candidate for the 4th District, Byron Sigcho-Lopez. Thank you so much, Mr. Alderman, for coming in. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I have to ask, because it's not important about me, it's important about you. Can you tell the audience who you are and what you've been up to?
Thank you. Yes, so my name is Byron Sigcho-Lopez. I'm a former teacher. I'm also a father of triplets. I always said I'm a father, a husband of triplets. They're going to be 4 years old pretty soon, as we were talking earlier.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And they really are motivation, to come every day. So I'm always lead by, I'm a family person. I'm always appreciative of the community around us. I'm a former teacher. I worked in adult education for over 10 years. I work in the poorest areas of the city of Chicago, helping parents and youth at risk complete their GED, learn English, computer literacy, financial literacy. I came to our country when I was 17 years old as a minor, as an unaccompanied minor. And so I'm an immigrant myself, so this is a very much personal fight, and this is home for me.
Right. And I want to ask, that journey, you're coming from Ecuador, your mother was just in a coma after a tragic car accident, and you come to Tennessee, not Chicago first, you go to Tennessee.
Yes.
And you were housed by a family there, and you come up to Chicago. You came into a system as a non-native English speaker, and you thrived. You went to Cumberland University, and you won multiple academic awards. How has that prepared you to run into this system and how does that drive you to conduct yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you. So yes, and when I was 17 years old, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to come learn English and finish high school. My mom, indeed, what prompted me to leave our home country was a car accident, indeed. My brother was in intensive care for almost a month. My mom was in coma for a few weeks, and the medical bills really what prompted a family crisis within a crisis in the country. Inflation was in the triple digits. I wouldn't say double digits, So we lost the currency, and my mom, felt a thing overwhelmed. When she woke up out of the coma, I said, "Yeah, you gotta go. You gotta leave." And I did not even know what I was getting myself into, but I knew my mom was asking me to do something and to be able to continue my education abroad. I remember even the settlement, the money that we got for the car wreck was at $6,000. I still remember even how much, and they gave me a lot of the savings that we had, and I was very grateful for my mom, my parents, my family, always being a support system. I'm my second family when I arrived in Tennessee. So I arrived to a family originally, but they had a family emergency. They also had a death or a sickness in the family. So I ended up in a church, and a family from Tennessee, a black family with roots in Chicago, helped me, get my education. And also, my second mom was called Carmen, was a Black Studies professor. I'm indebted to her too about the lessons about history, about our country, and really that drive of justice and community service actually came from both families. I said, so I feel very fortunate. And Chicago was where my first trip in 2021 was, and Pilsen was one of the first places I visited. So I feel very humble and honored to represent such a hardworking community that I came to see 25 years ago.
We are built by our families, and I feel you're very evident of that because after all that sacrifice, all that experience, you came here. And you're in Pilsen, you're in the heart of Chicago, as the town is called, little village, and you became a teacher, and then you went into politics. What was that transition like for you, and why did you decide to take that leap?
Well, so after I was working for, experience in the private sector, I was studying economics. I always thought about learning about the inequity, the redistribution of resources and how our community was always getting the worst of it, So those inequities always very, very, very important to me to address. And so I started working in the community, as I said, as a grad student at UAC. Eventually was hired by the UAC Center for Literacy. And I learned a lot. I learned so much. I actually work a lot with Head Start parents, parents below the poverty line.
We were talking about that before with the Chicago public school system, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And how inequitable it was, So the privatization of public education really was astounding to me, how charter networks were running political campaigns. The former campaign manager for Rahm Emanuel, Juan Rangel, he was the CEO of a charter network at the same time as he was running the campaign for Rahm Emanuel. Okay. So the link between politics and education and how our kids were cheated, literally, defrauded, in the case of UNO, from public education dollars, and then how kids were not having access to special education, bilingual lessons and all that. So that inequity really what prompted me to get involved in politics. Ultimately, when they started closing schools in the poorest areas of the city, that really got us out of the classroom and into the front lines to fight to keep the schools open. We fought to keep they announced 130 schools to close in 2012, and two of the schools here in Pilsen were in the list, another one nearby. So 3 schools announced to be closed in our ward, and that's what prompted us to organize to keep our schools open.
Right, and you seem very community-based. And what I've seen from your social media, from your online presence, and even you here in person, you walked into this restaurant and you had an immediate connection with Augustine. Again, I have to shout out Augustine.
Mole Village.
We're going to talk about that right now. This town is so vibrant. It seems so connected. Can you tell us a little bit about this ward and how you ended up here as the place that you decided to be alderman?
Yeah, so Pilsen, La Villita, these are historic, iconic ports of entry for immigrants like myself who have walked this community for generations, from the Czech community, Polish, and more recently the Mexican community. This has been a port of entry. We have industrial areas where many immigrants came to work, and the immigrant community is the backbone of our economy. Historically, has literally built our city, and from, like I said, Czech, Bohemian, Polish to the Mexican community. There's a great history of, and the history of the immigrant community is a history of sacrifice, resiliency, courage, and unfortunately the sad times that we live in. And this community, again, I'm always grateful for the teachers, mentors, friends, the community around us, because at the end of the day, that's what we have, especially with people like myself many people who have left their homes, their families behind, and they're trying to start again. So this is very much home, and places like Mole Village, these are the small businesses where a lot of our community works, small businesses that, again, are the backbone of the fabric of our economy, the fabric of our neighborhood, which is very community-based. Here we help each other out. We always say we like everybody to eat, and everybody has, everybody have a home. That's the motto, I think, that we try to embrace in one another. We help and protect each other.
Everyone likes food, and everyone needs to eat. That's a driving factor in my family. And we look at Moles, how does this represent, we talked about it a little bit, but this represents the ward as a whole. It's a vibrant, small business, Latino demographic. How does that fit in with your background and your area of expertise?
Mm-hmm. Mole Village, in fact, so they actually used to be located on Ashland, several years ago. And, they moved now here on Blue Island and Wood. So I think it speaks about a lot of how our communities are struggling, from displacement, but even then, there's very much still have a commitment to continue to fight to stay, So I think small businesses like Augustine's Mole Village are really an inspiration. They work so hard every day just to try to make ends meet. And then you see the smile, the welcoming. There's one of the few communities where really it is a community. Yeah. People greet each other, and even in the midst of the hardest moment, we just saw a horrific attack on our neighborhoods, by ICE mercenaries, that the new Gestapo that Trump is trying to put in in our neighborhoods to terrorize entire communities. Literally the politics of fear, corruption, and hate. And our neighborhoods, thrive because they help each other out. We always say, help support your small business, support your neighborhood organizations, your neighborhood businesses, and very much represent that solidarity. They are also part of One Fair Wage, for instance, one of the first restaurants who sign on One Fair Wage. And this is not a mega restaurant.
Can you tell us a little bit about One Fair Wage is for those who might not know?
Yeah, so One Fair Wage is a national campaign promoting dignified wages for all workers, especially in the restaurant industry. Like they were, for instance, behind the big campaign of One Fair Wage here in Chicago, so that tipped workers don't get the sub-minimum wage, so that everybody make a dignified salary. And the city of Chicago has been pushing for such a important effort to have workers pay dignified wages. I support now as a candidate for Congress a $26 minimum wage for all workers. Billionaires, are the only minority destroyer in our country. Billionaires like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, that are weaponizing even AI against entire communities. This is not only in Gaza or in Iran, it's also in our neighborhoods. So this represents like the effort to make sure that workers and the small businesses, the working people, the only majority of our country, gets organized, and by us being able to have minimum wage, dignified salaries, we can spend more time at home. We can take care of each other. But when people are barely making ends meet, it's really difficult to even have some time to breathe.
And so I have to ask, with all of your experience, you've been in the political world for, correct me if I'm wrong, around 7 years?
As an alderman, yes, since 2019.
2019, I've been covering Illinois politics for Matthew. What time is it? 11:09. So about 20 minutes. What's the biggest fight you've had to drive home in this community and as a politician yourself?
So I think that one of the most exemplary fights were from the fight to keep our schools open. So that was a major fight when people saw that when we fight, we win. We fought, we keep the schools open. The other one, I think, is around housing. That is a very important effort. So there was a proposal right before I came in, 500 luxury units that they were trying to push in our community by a New York developer. The community organized, and by us organizing, not only were we able to stop the development, we were able to buy back those lots, 6 acres of land. Those lots are now city-owned, and now we're going to have 432 affordable housing units for people from the neighborhood. So from luxury housing to all affordable. That's the power of the people, And I think I was very humbled to see that when people organize, when people fight for their community, we cannot accept the inevitability of displacement, that there's nothing we can do, that when we come together, the impossible is possible. And I see, like now we're fighting to create more affordable housing in our neighborhood, to have families to send their kids to school, to continue to support small businesses, to be a fabric, like communities like ours are a pride really nationwide, and we want to continue to be here.
Absolutely. And when you talk about those fights, you talk about those events and all of those experiences you've shaped, I think a very valuable point of view on all candidates is what's the biggest lesson they've learned through their experience? What do you think your biggest lesson is through your 7 years of political experience?
My biggest lesson is just the influence of big money in politics, that unfortunately we live in a world where today in America we have 938 billionaires who run our country. We pretty much now have a foreign government in Israel running our country pretty soon. So that occupation and apartheid are not things of the past, but they can become things of the present and hopefully not the future. And that that same influence is here in our city. We have billionaires that like probably a handful of billionaires that really run our state and city governments, and that we need to organize so that the only majority that's supposed to be governing our communities is the working people, and that we need to have more representatives from our communities to be leaders and to really promote the vision of the majority. And I think like one of my lessons being that there's a small fraternity of puppets of the billionaire class, and there is a fight that needs more leaders coming from neighborhoods, from the grassroots. And I think that is a fight that we remain to be committed today, to fight to represent the majority of our neighbors.
And so my last question for this kind of portion about you and about the community is, do you think you're the right candidate to lead that fight against, you say billionaires, you say foreign governments, and you say you want those things? Do you think you're the right person through your experience to lead that?
Yes, I believe so. I think like when we told sometimes that immigrants are the enemy of the state. We just saw how like a 5-year-old kid with with a Spider-Man suit in Minneapolis, Leon Ramos, is this enemy of the state. While we have a long list of pedophiles that are yet to be brought to justice. I think that we have kids in concentration camps today. We have American citizens that are being killed in broad daylight, just because standing up for what is fair and just. Our own Constitution allows for the right to dissent, the right to fight tyranny. Our Constitution mandates that inside of tyranny, resistance is a duty. And I'm proud to many Americans across the country who are fighting that fight. I've been fighting it for a while here in our neighborhood. We've been organizing for almost 20 years here to have public education, to have housing as a human right, like affordable housing. But a community cannot fight in silos, So we need to build coalitions in the suburbs. I'm so glad. I know you got a good friend, Angos, in La Grange. I'm so proud to see young people like you, because I think that there's so much more in common that we have, and that we cannot allow our kids to go die in senseless wars, while our own communities are starved to death here in our country. So I believe that I am the right person fighting because I understand the history on both sides of the border, and that a traffic stop should never be a death sentence. That a father like Silverio Villegas Gonzalez trying to get to work, trying to provide for their kids, should not end up dead because of a misdemeanor. An immigration violation is a misdemeanor. It's not a death sentence. So I believe that to fight for Medicare for all, to fight for housing as a human right, to fight to stop the madness in our country with ICE mercenaries, to make sure that everybody can eat and everybody has a home, to make sure that we have the basics in the richest country in the world. I think that we need to come together, and I feel that we've been fighting the billionaires class for a long time, and we need to complete the work in Washington. That's where the fight is at.
Well, I think you just summed up our next transition, our next topic here, and what the 18 to 24 age range actually cares about. Yes. We'll talk about that right after a small break. This is Augustine. He's the executive chef and owner of Molly's Mexican Village restaurant, and he was kind enough to let me host my interview in his restaurant for free. I cannot thank him enough. His and his staff's kindness were out of this world, and after a meal there, I would be crazy to not recommend this awesome spot to anyone watching this video. Now back to the show. Thanks for coming back after the pause, and now we're really into the crux of the show. What the 18 to 24 age range cares about, and how candidates like you can address those issues and address that audience. But before we get anywhere, I want to introduce them to you. The 18 to 24 age range. I have a picture right here, and I think it's you. We'll put that on the screen. Tell me about that picture.
That's a funny. Yeah, that's a 2006. That's when I graduated from Cumberland University, and I was the President Award. So I was I think one of the valedictorian, I believe.
Yeah. Valedictorian. That's amazing.
Yes, I was very honored to receive the President's Award, by the university.
And put that side by side. We got like the Fountain of Youth here in the 25th Ward. Like
probably almost about your age, maybe. When I graduated.
Yeah, besides the beard.
And I put a little bit more weight.
It's when you look at that picture, you look at yourself receiving that diploma and receiving that award at that 28, what were you, like 22, 23?
22, 21, 22. Mm-hmm.
And so right in that age range, what were the issues that you cared about at that time? Yeah,
so I always, thought about, because I always, one always has like their eyes in what you see around the world, So I always thought about, my mind was so set in how do we address the inequities? We see the world of inequality and injustice. So I always thought about what we can, as young people, they always have that idealism. Like, how do we change that? Why do we have to endure so much pain? I've seen in Tennessee or here in Chicago, there's a lot of, we've seen a lot of poverty, So it's like, it was eye-opening because one thing we are the richest country in the world, but then you say people not having access to medical care or, at the time, I saw some friends of mine who, could not afford even to go to the doctor and so forth. So those inequities, I always thought, how do we how do we address those issues, And I remember that was, still even back then, always something that was in my mind, And I'm so humbled that I seem to have an ability to do this, in my job as an alderman, to fight that.
And I want to ask, doesn't look like it, but you're 20 years removed from that age range. You're 42 right now.
20 years later. Yeah.
20 years later, how do you view, the age group I'm in? How do you view that 18 to 24 age group? How do you view them as not as like a number, but as like the emotion and the personality of that group right now in today's modern society?
Look, I am really proud of young people, I feel that young people are listening, like never before. And being a good listener means that you have empathy, And I've seen in the public opinion around, for instance, the genocide in Gaza, 80% of the people condemned that and said, look, we should not be using our government or tax dollars to bomb innocent girls, little girls in Iran or the genocide in Gaza or wherever we are intervening to leave misery and pain and suffering, because ultimately the chickens will come home to roost. And I feel that is what's happening now, that same policy, because foreign and domestic policies for a long time has been divorced from our electoral system, So we have committed atrocities in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Latin America, these issues that we're seeing in our country, people disappear. We've seen it in Chile, in the first 9/11. We've seen the assassination of a democratically elected president like President Allende, and then we saw a dictator like Pinochet disappearing thousands of people. We've seen that before. We see Nazi Germany disappearing 5 million Jewish people. So when we see those things in history, we gotta look back to see what we learned. And I think young people are paying attention like never before. Like when they said to dismiss the public opinion around the genocide in Gaza, around the atrocities of kidnapping people, having kids in concentration camps, I'm very proud. Young people care. And that's the thing about the parties that are out of touch. They say, well, they don't know, they don't pay attention. But I'm really proud to say, what we're seeing is that young people reject the system by not participating. And we need to change that.
You made my job easy and gave me a transition, because according to a very democratically diverse and national survey from the Circle Center for Information and Research of Civic Learning and Engagement, the youth don't think their vote matters. What do you have to say to that?
I mean, by seeing what's happening in our country, it seems like that is the case. Look, in our own primary here in the 4th Congressional District, we were the congressional district most affected by far. There were 5 open races in this last cycle. AIPAC bought, tried to buy all of them, but at least bought 2 out of the 4. And in this one, in the 4th Congressional District, the sitting congressman basically used a machine tactics of anointing the successor. Last minute, he withdraws the petitions, allows only his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, to enter the race.
And we will definitely touch on it later. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no.
We'll touch on that later. But that's another large point, that the youth in that survey said a majority of the youth would engage with civics if they didn't feel like there was government money or large corporate money with that voice. What do you have to say about that and the influence of that? I mean, you said a lot about the influence of large money so far, but especially how it impacts that age group.
Yes, because like I said, when young people see that, they say, well, my vote doesn't matter, the decision was already made. Right. Or they look at, the rising cost of college tuition, of entering a trade, or even afford a rent. A lot of people live still with their parents or have to be, even coach surfing or with other 4 or 5 roommates, right? So when the conditions are so difficult right now, it is hard, for young people to even make ends meet or even find a job. So what message do we send young people,
Yeah. I hear a message coming in from the restaurants. We're pause for a second, take a sip of coffee. Going back to that answer of the influence of large money on that 18 to 24 age group, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I think like when you see, for instance, like Elon Musk, putting $250 million to buy the White House, or Jeff Bezos, or whatever the billionaire is, it really sends a chilling message that elections can be bought out, and that the electoral system doesn't really care about what young people have to say. When we, like I said, that's what I mentioned, young people care about what's happening domestically, what happened to their neighbors, what happened with affordability, what happens with democracy, what happens abroad. I mean, young people are, in my opinion, they're really informed. It's just we need to change the system so that they can participate. I love to have more young people, be part of the change, running for office. We have a lot of wonderful people who have helped. Even the last mayoral election, 20,000 young kids came out to vote. They made the difference on who became the mayor for the city of Chicago. So we need to empower. We need to get out of the. That's what I'm running for Congress, to make sure that we lift those barriers, that we make voting more accessible. We got to protect the Voting Rights Act. And I think young people are really, honestly, I think Gen Zers are going to change this. I think that Gen Zers are going to be, and the people who came after that, I think, are definitely a lot more in tune with the reality of the world, and that we must lift and get out of the challenge, and get out of the way almost.
With that being said, I want to bring, the point of this show was to bring the issues that the 18 to 24 age range cares about. And according to that survey, which I'll link down below, it's a great survey, read how they did it, very statistically sound. The number one issue for that age range was the rising cost of affordability.
Yes.
The second issue was housing, and the third issue was healthcare. Mm-hmm. Can we go through each one of those? And I'm not going to put any stats at you, I'm not going to ask any questions, but what is your immediate plan if you were elected into Congress to tackle the rising cost of affordability?
Yeah, look, I think it is if you're a family or a young student or, in whatever demographic, or a senior, everybody's struggling with affordability. I think that the one thing that we can do is tax the billionaire class. 938 billionaires who don't pay their fair share, but they run the country as their own. So 5%, there's already a bill. Senator Sanders, I was a delegate of Senator Sanders in 2020, big believer of taxing the rich and corporations to provide the very basics for the majority of the people. A 5% wealth tax on what is called the Make the Billionaires Pay the Fair Share Act. Okay. A 5% tax on these billionaires will provide enough to build 7 million affordable homes throughout the country. Wow. Illinois needs 140,000 units of affordable housing. You have it right there. We also are able to provide caps on childcare, restore medical care, access to Medicare. We also can even put relief, $3,000 checks for every member of a household of four making less than $150,000 a year, so that they can, be able to make ends meet. Imagine the amount of wealth that is there by just taxing those 938 billionaires at 5% of their wealth. I think that we got a lot to do with the financial transaction tax. All this stock behind, these stock trades of now even Congress people getting into insider information to make money, make themselves millionaires. By taxing that, we can start putting money on housing and education and healthcare. We are the richest country in the history of the world. The problem is that those billionaires are running and corporations are running the country, and we need to get rid of that kind of system where billionaires can buy elections and we working people have to be at the mercy of these billionaires.
I have to ask, because it's so easy nowadays with the way media works, is you can say one thing and then completely do another. Yeah. What research, what data, and what experiences have you had to actually, kind of guarantee or put some faith into that process of taxing billionaires? Because that's a lot easier said than done. And is there any proof that that will actually work?
Yes. So in Massachusetts, there was a 4% millionaire tax that has funded schools and has helped a lot of balancing budgets without putting in the backs of working people. Okay. Massachusetts already did it, and it worked. You're always going to hear like the end of days. Oh, that this is going to end. People are going to leave. They did it with Zora Mondani won in New York City. All these billionaires, we're going to leave New York. They haven't left. So they haven't left in Massachusetts. So unfortunately in Illinois, Governor Pritzker, who is also a billionaire himself, yes, has not been willing to listen to the people. Even though in Illinois, in the last election, 2024, over 70% of people in Chicago voted in favor of a similar measure, at 3%, even less than what Massachusetts did. So this helps to fund schools, to fund property tax relief. Sadly, political class in Illinois is not listening to the people. That's why we need young people to get involved, because we need to tax millionaires and corporations so that we can provide the basic needs for all Americans throughout the country.
And so, through that message, you've tackled the second two most important issues to that age group. But let's just go through them individually if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, of course.
Housing. You say that tax will bring in millions of houses, affordable houses. Mm-hmm. What does an affordable house look like to you? And what is that plan to develop that around areas like here or throughout the Chicagoland area and throughout, not even just Chicago, because we're talking about all of Illinois here as a congressional candidate. What does that look like to you? What does that envision?
That's a great question. You know, I am the chair of the housing and real estate. And we're here, for instance, and I study economics, right? You know, I don't believe in propaganda. I look at the facts, and that's great that, I mean, I'm so glad. That's what I think young people like you are looking at facts, not propaganda. Because they say, well, just build, like the last initiative in the state. Well, just allow more building and just build, baby, build. We've seen that in 2008, hasn't worked out. What we need to build is affordable homes. What we need to build is for families who make less than the average median income. A lot of people are very much in debt right now. The economic ends meet. So we need to provide subsidized housing. Here in our community, for instance, not too far from here, Cermak and Ashland, you're going to see some tile buildings that are coming up. 98 units of all affordable housing for families making less than the average median income, at 30% average the median income, because the families who really have lost a job, the family members who in our communities are being, attacked by ICE, or they have been attacked by an economy that is providing all for the super rich, but not for the working people. So it's about creating the supply, but also supply of affordable housing. For a long time, the government has said, well, just let the market decide everything, you know? And the market is not going to solve for the people who are strapped. They have worked very well for the rich, but very poorly for the people, for the majority of Americans. So what we see is, let's increase the supply of affordable housing. That's what we're doing here. We're already in the next year or so, we're going to have 98 units here. In the other lots that I mentioned, on 18th and Peoria, 6 acres of land. The first phase of 76 units, all affordable for families making less than the average median income, so that they can afford. You know, that means a rent for a senior of $700 a month. You know, or for a 2-bedroom, $950 for a 2-bedroom, because that's in line with the incomes. Well, like right now in our 4th congressional district, 1 out of 3 families are strapped by rent and housing costs. 1 out of 3. So this is across the board. They're families, seniors who cannot retire because they have to pay the property taxes. They already have even the household paid for. So to me means helping those seniors, taxing the billionaires, taxing corporations, so seniors can retire with dignity. We can create more affordable housing for families, seniors, for young people who don't make those kind of high incomes.
I'm wearing a suit right now, but $900 a month in rent sounds, pretty good for my situation. So I want to ask, I mean, you can't make everyone happy, and you can't account for everyone in the population. But when you put it like affordable housing just for people below the median income, is that at all kind of separating those, maybe not under the median income, but right there and still kind of month by month, check by check, and salary by salary, still struggling to move forward? They're just kind of stagnant. Mm-hmm. Is that a situation that you've looked at all?
Yeah, so, and look, I think that we need to provide housing for a wide range, right? So definitely there is, there are young professionals, like there are people who can afford, and we should help, for home ownership. So we need to provide help. The city just created a new initiative to help Chicagoans, to help to buy their first home, right? So there are initiatives for sure that need to happen to buy their first home. Right. There's also seniors who now they have pensions. They don't have any extra income. They cannot even get an extra income. They're already retired. So we need to provide housing. Look, I went to Vienna, and in Vienna, a 1-bedroom rents for $300 a month. Wow. That's a system that has been over 100 years. And those were democratic socialists. In fact, when I went to Vienna, it was funny because when I came in, so the majority of the council was actually democratic socialists. Really? And I think what happened in New York is not too far from what happens to have here. We also need to have some sort of rent control and subsidize those small homeowners who keeps the rents affordable. There are homeowners for today who don't want to kick out their tenants who have been there for years, or they want to help a young student who wants to go to school. We need to help those homeowners to get subsidies when they keep the rents affordable. Today, the developers and corporations have those subsidies. 60,000 units in housing in Chicago that are empty. They claim subsidies that we pay. Right. Why do we subsidize rich corporations instead of them? So we want the state, for instance, here to lift the ban on rent control so that we can subsidize the small homeowners, so we can subsidize those who keep rents affordable, so we can create more affordable homes. So I think there's a lot that we can do, but one thing that we cannot do is let business as usual. I'm really a big fan of Mayor Mondani. I think he's doing a great job on addressing the affordability crisis in New York, and I think that we can take some cues from that.
And so, like Mamdani, you mentioned him. He has been big into healthcare and making sure that that is something that can in New York, and hopefully that works out for them. And healthcare is important. What is your plan for healthcare as 18 to 24-year-olds care about? If they need an ambulance ride, it's not going to bankrupt them. Or they need care, it's not going to put someone like you know that situation. We mentioned it before, of debt in the hospital. What's that like, and how have you tackled that?
Look, I think the Congress just and the Senate just approved like a $96 billion allocation for more wars, and for ICE in particular, right? ICE allocation in these last $96 billion.
Yes, they agreed to fund ICE the rest of Trump's term, is what you're talking about?
Exactly. So imagine those $96 billion, instead of going to kidnap neighbors or shooting in broad daylight, to be used to make sure that every American has access to medical care. That alone, and remember, ICE did not even exist like 20 years ago, right? So there's an agency that has been created out of thin air to terrorize people. I think there's migration from the global south because of climate boiling, right? So I think that we need to tackle the issue of climate boiling, climate change, and we need to stop destabilizing countries abroad because that's the migration that is coming our way. So by supporting collaboration, international solidarity, I think that we have a better way to address this migration crisis that comes from the climate boiling and other issues of destabilizing democracy and so forth. I think that by us stopping funding agencies like DHS, ICE, who provide zero safety for everybody. These ICE agents, mercenaries, have not made anyone safer, right? If anything, now we have impersonators, we have all sorts of issues. Now we're gonna have pretty soon these insurrectionists with $1.6 billion on their pockets, to come and create more chaos in our cities. So I think it's important that we stop funding that. That alone can help address the lack of access to medical care for young people and for all Americans. Look, and I give you an example. That $2 billion per day that we're investing in Iran alone. The Iran war cost their taxpayers $2 billion every day. That alone can provide access to childcare for every child in America. Ending ICE funding DHS will provide medical care for every American in our country.
You mentioned immigration, you mentioned ICE, and you mentioned all of those international conflicts. Can I extrapolate and summarize your plan for affordable health care is to just turn that money from those other allocations into affordable health care? That's what you're saying?
That's right.
How do you envision that happening, and what kind of battle do you find that to be? What kind of battle do you envision that to be in Congress? Because do you think other people will agree with you on that one?
Yes, I think like right now, as sadly the affordability crisis is hitting every American household. You see with gas prices, inflation, and I think in the months to come, things are going to get tougher and tougher, where the billionaire class gets richer and richer. So I think that November is the opportunity to flip the Senate, to flip the Congress, to get our best fighters. I'm very excited to see other great fighters across the country, to put the best fighters that we have to go to Congress, not to capitulate with the billionaire class. It almost seems like the bipartisanship around some issues works, when the billionaire class said so. But when we have fighters, like I remember Cory Bush, for instance, when in the pandemic, when people were getting evicted and people were saying in Congress there's nothing we can do, we're going to go to the legislative break. Right. Cory Bush went to the stairs of the Capitol, went in to start like shaming their colleagues for leaving to vacations while people were getting evicted, and there was provisions to help and provide some assistance, assistance from the federal government to people who were getting evicted, helps for housing and some relief money. I think organizing works, and when we organize, we win.
And you mentioned that experience with what you just mentioned, but what other experiences do you talk to hospitals around? Have you talked to medical professionals about what funding they need? Sorry, stutter right there. What funding they need to make that system work, and what their problems are? Have you talked to those actual workers on the day-by-day lines?
Absolutely. Look, I was just with the nurses, nurses union, Rush Hospital, 2,000 nurses. My kids were the liver rush. They were born there, and I was very grateful because when they were born during the pandemic, so it was a scary time. Super grateful of all medical workers, especially nurses that are frontline workers. During the pandemic, essential workers, now all of a sudden we forget about them. So we've been working with them to make sure that we make healthcare a human right. We cannot have people who are afraid to go to the doctor or unhoused residents who die in the streets because of lack of access to healthcare. So in a system, like I said, the richest country in the world, we need to work with nurses. We need to work with all our communities to make sure that healthcare is a human right. So I think the nurses, they just unionized, by the way. Right. Those 2,000 nurses are going to be part of the nurses union. And I think that is important that we work with the labor, that we work with our communities to fight to get those funds back into the healthcare system. I think that we don't need a system of ICE mercenaries who come and shoot at our neighbors or put kids in concentration camps. These ICE agents are, some of them raping little girls in these facilities. Is really shameful. So I think that us working with labor unions like the nurses union, I think there were so many resources out there that we can allow to be wasted in wars, wasting in ICE agents, ICE mercenaries. We need to make sure that we make Medicare for all a reality so that no American goes sick, that no American is suffering because they cannot access life-saving medication, and these insurance companies that are making a killing out of the suffering of Americans.
And so, thank you for that answer, and thank you for addressing each one of those concerns as we walk through them. There's so many more that the 18-24 age range has. And they're all very broad, but also very specific as to what they want to see changed. How can you guarantee, as a candidate, that you will continue to push forward and continue to drive yourself to see that change happen? Yeah. Is that something you can do?
Absolutely. Look, as someone who, like I said, as an immigrant, as a naturalized citizen who loves this country, very few places will allow, this opportunity to be a representative of an immigrant community. So I very much feel I represent the aspirations, the dreams, and hopes of communities who committed no crime. These are immigrant communities that, like in any country, we have a system of asylum seeking and a path, to citizenship. But that path today doesn't exist. We have a broken immigration system, and we're dehumanizing and we're criminalizing immigration. Look, I give an example of how, Trump has completely created such a mess. Now, there was an average of 125,000 asylum seekers every year. Now I think that number is 6,000. I think every country, I think that most democracies, if not all democracies, have an asylum seeking process, right? I think when we change that, we're creating unsafe conditions for everybody because there are people who are fleeing violence. Ukraine, imagine there are 30,000 Ukrainians who now have called Chicago home because they are fleeing war and terror. There's many places, if this is Congo or is Venezuela or whoever it is, we want to make sure that people have access to safety. Our country has been, for a long time, just like many countries, a place where people can do that. Unfortunately now, the people who Trump is giving asylum is people who believe in apartheid, for instance. 90% of the people who now have come to our country come from South Africa. Many of them believe in apartheid states. So I think that we cannot allow the state of Israel to, now the military of our country and Israel are merging, right? So when that is happening, there's a call for action. I believe that as looking at policies from the lenses of the most vulnerable, the oppressed, I think that if we are able to care for the unhoused, for the immigrant undocumented who are terrorized, for the people who have no voice, we'll provide a voice for everyone. We truly will create a big tent. Palestinians, Muslims, trans communities, immigrant communities, all of us, when we see each other as human beings, as Martin Luther King said, and that's what I'm passionate about this, as someone who has triplets, I think I have some at stake. And I tell you that when we see, and our aspiration will be that our kids are treated with fairness and dignity, and that they're not judged by the skin of their color, but the character, by the character of their souls, and that's my aspiration, my dream for every family and every child.
And especially for that 18 to 24 age range, you want to see them succeed with a diverse and just culturally inherited population.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, I mean, our young kids, when they can achieve their dreams, if they're going to college, going to trades, or go to sports, whatever they do, by us, the way that we treat our children and our seniors says a lot about the priorities of our society. When we don't care about the seniors, we don't care leaving them without medical care. In Illinois alone, 434,000 people we left without medical care by July. That's inhumane. So, or college students, right? They are now afraid even to go to a doctor. So for me, it's important that every child, every young people have access to education, to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. Because remember, those are the kids, I'm banking on the young kids because I know they're eventually gonna take care of us.
Right.
And their well-being is our well-being. And I think that we need to provide that investment. Today, access is completely unaffordable. So is childcare. In fact, I was making this correlation that a year of childcare today is almost as much as a year of college tuition in a public university. So we have an issue of affordability for college students and for families who want to spend time with the kids. And they're correlated because those children eventually will grow up. And if we are not able to spend time with them at home,
they'll continue to be stuck in a system of unaffordability.
Absolutely.
And so that's the nutshell that 18, 24-year-olds are facing right now.
Absolutely, and we need to change that. We should not normalize that. And my fight, and my bet always with the young people, because look, even it was like when college students were organizing about the inhumanity, the genocide in Gaza. I saw a lot of college students, and I think that a lot of college students are always in the right. If we follow history, college students have been on the front lines of the Vietnam War or the apartheid state of South Africa when it fell down.
Right.
So. And the genocide in Gaza. Look at the public opinion, right? So when we listen to the young kids, we are on the right side of history. Students are always on the right side of history, student movements and the aspirations and dreams. We need to listen to them. I think that, and for that, we need to make sure that they come and participate. My ask of our young people is register to vote. A lot of people in our community are being kidnapped. People are getting killed, and this is only going to get worse. My ask is like, yes, elections don't solve everything, but the beginning of change. Having elected representatives, people who represent our communities, is the beginning of a new world. And my hope of young people is to get involved. Like if you are in the marches, voting is not enough to change things. We got to do organizing. We got to organize in the streets, in the legislative bodies, and whatever we need to do. But one thing that we cannot allow is the criminalization of apathy. That is going to consume, and we cannot let fear govern. We cannot let hope die.
And so, that voting group is calling for you to go to action. You're calling for them to go to action too. And I think it's a perfect way to summarize the end of this section too. We'll be right back after the break because that bell's ringing. That food smells amazing. We'll have that.
Yeah, we'll definitely eat after
this. Hey, if you want to learn more about Byron, then please check out the description below for links to his social media and his official website, where you can learn about what he campaigns for, what he's been up to, and where you can find him next for public events that he hosts. Now let's get back to the video. We're back, and now Molly's getting kind of full. We're in the community.
Getting close to lunchtime, I guess.
Hey, but I think that's perfect because we're in the community, we're a part of the community, and that's a community that you're running for, and you've been a part of as the 25th Alderman, but also you're running as the 4th District. It's a much larger area. But can you tell me, in this congressional race, what is your immediate nut summary of it so far?
So the summary in this, or like what I'm hearing from every person from corner to corner of the 4th Congressional District, is the issues of affordability, the issues and the concerns about ICE enforcement, ICE attacks in our community, and the devastation and trauma that have left, and if they're coming back again, as Trump has threatened now to send ICE mercenaries to polling locations. And finally, of course, the threats to democracy in general. Are we even going to have an election in November, right? So those are and the affordability crisis that keeps mounting. Right. So those are the things that I'm hearing from corner to corner, and the need to fight this, not to allow these atrocities to continue, but to really fight to build coalitions and to build each other up, not tear each other down.
And so you talk about those problems and those fights that the people are having, but even as a candidate yourself, you've been having a fight through the 4th District, and you were, from the start, it's been different. This race has been different. Can you tell us, and put into your own words, what happened when you were going to be on the ballot?
Yeah, so a few things. I think at first, we saw at least 5 Congress people retiring, right, for different reasons. The 4th Congressional District was the district that was the most affected by the ICE attacks in our community. You know, we have the Silverio Villegas Gonzalez murder. We've seen the mazing of a 1-year-old child. We saw, we saw attacks on our neighbors. Thousands of people affected, by kidnappings and so forth. So, and unfortunately, we were the 4th Congressional District was the only district where we did not have a primary. The local Congressman Garcia, in the last possible minute, withdrew his petitions, and only Chuy Garcia, the incumbent, the current congressman. And then he allowed only his chief of staff to enter her petitions, effectively leaving only one name as the Democratic nominee for this 4th Congressional District. So.
And so, I apologize for interrupting. You're a Democrat right now as an alderman, right?
Correct.
Would you have run as a Democrat if given the chance in that primary and tried to take that Democratic seat?
Likely. I think it's important that when we're being attacked, we're being in the front lines. As we're being tear gas, we were tear gas in Brighton Park when these mercenaries shot 5 times at Marimar Martinez. She's very fortunate to be alive. It's very a miracle. We also were there, in every time when they tried to kidnap disco mall vendors and assaulted high school students, when they mazed a 1-year-old, or tried to kidnap an 11-year-old child trying to get to her dad because he was filming them. So when we were doing all of that, Congressman Garcia and his chief of staff were plotting to undermine democracy and take away the voice of the people. And that is not acceptable. So we would have challenged this. We know that in Congress, they are making our lives miserable, not even difficult, miserable in Congress and Senate with this ICE funding, taking away funding for medical care, housing, education, to provide money to these mercenaries in masks to terrorize us. So we definitely were going to challenge that. But sadly, that was not even a choice. We now had to run as an independent. We had to collect we collected over 17,000 petitions, which is the maximum to be on the ballot. Right. And not only happy with conducting that scheme, cheating on the residents of the 4th Congressional District, now Congressman Garcia and Patty Garcia are challenging those 17,000 petitions to try to knock out us at the ballot. So they're doubling down in these undemocratic tactics to suppress the voice of the people, and that sends a red message to people, especially young people, who feel that, the decision was already been made, or like Patty Garcia says, I'm a Democrat, so that should be enough.
And so we talk about that ballot. Can we go through the rest of the names there?
Absolutely.
And I saw 2 things. One, I saw in the Chicago Tribune article recently that the independent candidates for the 4th District agree that Patty Garcia needs to go. Mm-hmm. And that was, Chris Getty was one of them, along with 2 of the other independents. Is that something that you share a belief in?
Yes, surely. I think that if someone is, if we cannot trust someone to do the basics, as of allowing a democratic process, how do we trust her to tax the billionaire class? How do we trust her to make decisions for the majority of people when they continue to gaslight, as of there's no issue with this? Suppressing the voice of the people or undermining democracy is a major problem. Undermining the Voting Rights Act when the Republicans are gotten it all together is shameful. And that's one of the reasons that I think we agree that we should make sure that the ballot access is always available for all people, especially in this congressional district that's being so attacked by the Trump regime.
And so I would like to just summarize the current ballot for the 4th District for both the audience and just this conversation. Patty Garcia is a Democrat, Lupe Castillo as the Republican nominee, Ed Hershey as the Working Party nominee, and then Lindsay Church, Chris Getty, the mayor of Lyons, Mela Mazas, and then yourself, Byron Sigcho-Lopez, as 7 different candidates for this district. What does that diversity number of candidates tell you about this race, and is there any worry about that number, the split votes?
Well, I've been in open races like that before. When I was elected, I've been elected and re-elected by my community. I think that in a split race like that, I think it is important that democracy prevails. No matter what the outcome is, that the people, and only the people, elect the representatives. It doesn't matter if it's the Pope, or it doesn't matter who it is, only the elected Only the people can elect the representatives. So I think maybe one candidate already did not collect enough petitions, and there's a challenge to at least two of us. So I'm confident that we will prevail. I'm always for making sure that more that we have more ideas in our 4th congressional district. The 25th ward has the highest voting turnout in the whole 4th congressional district, that has the lowest voting turnout in the whole state. Why? Because we have contested elections here, and we always welcome democracy. We welcome more challenges. We welcome a debate, because debates and ideas ultimately, and this is going to be a national fight. Make no mistake about it. And I think to me is like the fight of the establishment Democrats that seem to be okay with rigging elections versus the people, Democratic Socialists in particular, that seems to be on the rise, like we see in New York and other parts of the country, represent the change. We cannot only question what's happening, we need to provide an alternative. And to me, it's like what Rosa Luxemburg said, it's going to be barbarism or socialism. To me, the Democratic Socialists, I've seen it, like I mentioned, I went to Vienna, and I've seen what they've done in office for 100 years. And look at the housing model that we're trying to mimic here. So I think that Democratic Socialists making housing, education, medical care a human right rather than a luxury, like Trump and his cronies are trying to do. I think that we have very different visions, the vision of the future and a vision of the past.
When you look at this race, I thought of it as like a kind of like a Mario Kart race, if the analogy connects here, where there's red shells being thrown, there's bananas on the track, and there's just a lot of obstacles. You make it through this heavy obstacle race, and you make it to Congress. Let's say you do win. What is the first issue you want to tackle?
Well, we need to strike Citizens United. If we continue to allow billionaires to buy elections, we are already in an oligarchy. We don't have the majority of Congress. 98% of Congress and Senate are bought out by AIPAC. We have foreign lobbying who decide for us. We assume we're joining the Israel, a genocidal maniac state with our own military. So we are sending our kids to die for not even for their best interest, for someone else's interest, where they have the luxury to have healthcare, education, and all that, and our kids they have food on their table. So to me, this is a vision of the future versus the vision of the past. And to me, it is very important that we encourage more people to come out and participate. It is fundamental that we don't allow AIPAC and big money to buy our elections. So we need to make sure that, like any foreign government, Israel has to be compliant with all that. We don't allow foreign governments to, if it's Russia or it's Israel, right? We need to ban that. We need to make sure that Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos don't control, vast majority of the resources of our country when working people are barely ends meet. So today in our country we have a vision of the future of what the society can be versus the billionaires who want to take us to forever wars, to starve people, and to make us in a fascist regime where people even are terrorized or terrified to speak up, or they can face the consequences of being disappeared or being incarcerated.
And so you make all those points, you make those fights, and you make those connections. I have a picture of the 4th district right here. I'll put that up on the screen. But this is the 4th district right now. We're in a very small, not a small part of it, but in the 25th ward, this grows. This population size for what your position would grow a couple times. Do you think you can handle that, and do you think you can represent all of those populations fairly as the 4th congressional district congressman?
Absolutely. Look, I think we clear the three, like I said, affordability. We have the threats to the ICE mercenaries and threats to democracy, and undermining our ability to elect our own representatives. And how do we battle that? How do we fight that? By taxing the rich, by taxing corporations, taxing 938 billionaires who are terrorizing working people. How do we make sure that medical care, housing, and education continue to be a right for Americans? It is by making sure that we fight for them. So this is a fight that we all are called to take. So to us to make sure that we fight to end ICE mercenaries by abolishing ICE, but also to send these mercenaries to judge. So these mercenaries who are raping little girls, or the mercenaries who kill Alex Preddy, or Nicole Good, or Keith Potter or Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, making sure that they face the consequences. And finally, that we restore the Voting Rights Act. We need to make sure that we remember the past. We got to look at the past, and that's why they want to ban books, they want to ban libraries, they want to ban public education, because they don't want us to know the past. They want us to get stuck in that past that where only a few can get ahead. And in a world like this, we see the billionaires will dehumanize and criminalize all of us. Immigrants and trans and other vulnerable Muslims will be just the beginning. So this is the moment when we fight. And I know that when we organize, we'll win.
And so I have one final question for you. That fight can sound bleak. It can sound hopeless. And it can sound like a lot of battles to go through. And it will never be perfect. And with a system like this, a system that from the outside perspective looks like it needs repair, how can you talk to that audience and say that there's hope for this system, there's hope that this can work, and there's hope that there's change that can be made?
Look, I think that just like we remember the legacies of Reverend Jesse Jackson, for instance, he said something really always resonated with me. We must keep hope alive. I'm always very grateful for Reverend Jesse Jackson, who see people like yourself and many other civil rights leaders who sacrifice, who pay with blood, sweat, and tears the right to vote for people like me, the right to vote for Americans, for women, for trans communities. We cannot go back to the past, a past that was never good for majority working people. So I tell young people in particular, be the change that you want to see, that we see each other as human beings, as neighbors, not as enemies or as threats. Hate always cloud a judgment. Hate has never been a recipe for anything that is worth fighting for. But love and revolutionary love and solidarity, international and local, has been always the recipe for better and greater things to come. So my hope is that young people participate, register to vote. If we see our neighbors being shot at, kidnapped and disappeared, or healthcare being gutted, or housing and prices of rent or property taxes double or triple, if this doesn't radicalize us, then what will? So this is the moment to get active. We need to get people in the streets and get people on the ballot boxes. I believe that the change starts with us. Register to vote. Register for those people who don't have a voice. Participate. Believe me when I say that young people have a lot more sense than the billionaire class that are disconnecting and protecting pedophiles and take us to forever wars. Silicon Valley is all for wars. They want to now have AI, not to create more jobs, to take out not only jobs, but also take us to forever wars. So this is the moment. Pope Leo just talked about this. There's a whole essay that he did on this, and I encourage everybody to read it. And also the weaponization of AI against working people. So if we want to have a future, that the American dream is dead. They just killed the American dream. They want to ban people like me even speaking, right? So in a moment like this, we must bet that working people, and especially young people, are the future, literally, and the present. So we must protect them. We must where treasures are, and I tell you, as a father of triplet, or children or young people are our treasure. Therefore, my heart and all my will is with them, always.
Well, I thank you for speaking with us and speaking about these issues that are affecting not only everyone, but specifically that 18 to 24 age range, as we try to raise more awareness and as that 2026 midterm election comes to pass. And I know this food behind me smells amazing.
Now it's getting distracting.
It's getting a little distracting, and so I think it's a perfect time for us to end the first episode of With the Mic. It's been a pleasure being your host, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank
now
you.
Let's go have some food.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Hi. I started With the Mic back in March as an idea because I wanted to see change within the 18 and 24 age group across the nation. I wanted them to engage with the system because I'm a part of that group, but I also know that my group does not vote compared to other older groups across the nation. And with that being said, Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez was kind enough to be my first guest on the interview. And very sadly, between the start of filming our interview to me editing this interview right now, he suffered an attack of political violence at his own home with his wife and 3 kids there. And very sadly, that happened. And very thankfully, they are all okay. And while I will leave my personal bias out of every interview I do, I do have to say, with my own personal statement, that that was wrong. That should not have happened. And I am very saddened to see that happen with our Chicagoland community. So please, if you have any information, reach out to the proper authorities and make sure that that does not happen again. To Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez, my heart goes out to you and your family. Thank you again for coming on the show and being my first guest. And thank you to everyone else that helped me make this possible. To my friends that helped me film this episode, to all my mentors and my family that helped me make this possible and coached me through a couple steps. I'm excited to make as many more episodes as I can and reach out to as many candidates as possible for the upcoming 2026 midterm elections and make sure that the 18-24 age group actually engage with the system. And so signing off for the first episode of With the Mic, I'm Mike Badrov, and thank you for tuning in.